What's the purpose of algebra? I mean, solving for X. You know a bunch of things, you don't know one thing. How many times in your life, in your job, do you need to be doing that? And actually, typically you have many variables you don't know, and you need to optimize and solve across those. And so ultimately, algebra is the logic course we all get to take.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out. And it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we're talking to Shalinee Sharma, the CEO and co-founder of Zearn, a nonprofit dedicated to transforming K-8 math education. Under her leadership, Zearn's online math platform has become a cornerstone in math learning for millions of students across the nation. She's not just an innovative leader, people. She is also a newly published author. Her book, Math Mind, The Simple Path of Loving Math, dives into how we can all develop a deeper appreciation and understanding of math, which, by the way, is good because I was a little afraid of math for a minute. I'm good at like addition and subtraction, but all the rest of it was a little scary to me. Now, this is an episode about entrepreneurship. Particularly, it's about entrepreneurship in the sector of nonprofit and also taking something that is a universal opportunity like math and figuring out how to actually build a business around it. That, I guess, a business that is nonprofit in nature. So I am very excited about this episode, and I want to thank you to the show, Shalinee. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Patrick. I'm so excited to be here.
I love how I said I want to thank you to the show because I'm just so excited to have you. Geez, it's Friday. All right, so let's get into it. As you know, I like to ask every one of my guests the same question, and so I will give you this, and there is no mathematical answer. Maybe there is for you. The question is this: tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
Yeah, I love this question, Patrick. So I've got a 1-2 punch, if that's allowed.
Do it.
Okay. So the first moment that really started to, I would say, make it hard to just go down the normal path I was on and just really kind of stuck with me in my gut was I worked at Bain Company for more than a decade. And when I was working there, I made friends with some of the most innovative and interesting teachers in New York City. And what they were proving was the possible. They were showing that kids who ordinarily didn't do well in school, who didn't have as many opportunities as let's say you or I did, those kids, they were crushing it in school. And what these teachers were showing is that, all kids could be incredibly successful academically and have all the amazing life outcomes follow, like economic life outcomes and so many others. And particularly they were showing it in math. At the time I was working at Bain Company, working with large Fortune 50 companies, just having really a lot of fun. And one of my teacher friends, he asked the question, and the question was, what if we put the best learning content up online for everyone for free, and we could make it about math? Could we change the world? Could we bring forth the first numerate generation? Another question he asked was, is the digital world, is education technology the next frontier of democratizing access to an excellent education, which is the sort of fuel that America is built on? And, I was going about my day at Bain Company and just in, over coffee chats, getting asked those kinds of questions. And they were so electric and so consuming that it was really hard to keep going in my normal day job. And I found myself really, I would say, obsessing over those questions, which resulted in me quitting my job at Bain and co-founding Zearn with these folks. And what I would say is, for and I still view myself as the arms and legs of great teachers. Great teachers are figuring out these answers, but there are ways we can scale them. And I have, the opportunity using my arms and legs to scale their great work. But then a second event happened. So this is my 1-2 punch.
All right. Boom.
So I'm a mom. I have 13-year-old twin boys, but at the time they're in preschool. And I was at pickup and, running late to pickup, frazzled. And this mom started talking to me. And I don't think she knew what I did. I think she was actually just making small talk. And we were waiting outside. The children were all inside the classroom. And she turned to me and she said, my kid, my daughter, she's just not a math kid. Your boys are math kids, but we're creative types and math just isn't our thing. We're not math kids. We're not a math family. And I was frozen with so much emotion coming through me. Because here I am at pickup, there's all these other parents around. I can't start, shouting about how, she shouldn't say that about a little kid. There's so much opportunity in front of this child. Who knows what this child is going to be? Because I would never get invited to another play date. Like that would be the end of my children's chance to make friends.
Don't invite her.
Exactly. Just obviously immediately. But I couldn't find the words and I didn't have the way to voice to her in a warm, friendly, interesting, exciting way to pique her curiosity, to make her even see that there was play and joy in math. And I just didn't have words for that. And I realized that I needed to bring just more than arms and legs. I needed to bring my voice forth as well. And what I just wanted to shout at that moment is you're completely wrong, because all kids are math kids. And math is creative. And in fact, it's beautiful. And problem solving is fun. You actually get everything clicks and you get this dopamine hit in your brain. And it's really fun. Just like reading a beautiful story takes you to another place. And all of a sudden you can read a novel and see all of humanity in this one novel. You can experience math and feel the power of the universe. It's all there. And so what it prompted me to do was to write this book and to really try to share those ideas, because so many kids are essentially getting left behind before we even start. They don't even get a shot at learning and loving math. That's my 1-2 punch.
That's a real 1-2 punch. And it's funny, I didn't mention this in the intro, but you and I were in grad school together at the Harvard Business School, a year apart. We didn't know each other. But, you did the conventional path, of the consulting and stuff, and you've moved into entrepreneurship and now an author, which is, stuff that maybe wasn't on your radar back then, but is now a part of what you're doing. And you've written this book, and I just want to talk a little bit because I think, it's funny, math. So math in other parts of the world, people don't do that. They don't say oh, you're not a math. It's very, I do a lot of work in Latin America. People, they just learn math. There's not all this identity around math that we have in America. And also we just are falling behind. And obviously, as we know, in a world where, we'll see where it all goes. Everything's changing quickly, but the sciences and those kinds of things, they are important, and you can't kind of opt out. You have to be in the game. Let's just start with a little definitional stuff, because I think it's important to get the terms right. What is numeracy?
Ooh, wow!
I had never heard the term until I read your book. So tell me, tell us all about it.
We're really weird. Mm-hmm. So if you're kind of opening with, this is weird, that's great. Let's observe how strange this is. So, okay, imagine if kids, millions of them, there are 55 million kids that are K-12 in America. Imagine if they go to school, and in that school, we are basically sorting out the kids who can become literate We just teach those ones to read. And the rest, it's totally fine. They come out illiterate, like whatever, like because they are illiterate.
Yeah, I'm just not a words person. I don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there were actually school systems that had memos that talked about that, or, there was a list of kids that are illiterate, that would make the front page of a newspaper because it would be so scandalous in terms of such abuse of children. Okay, so let's parallel that over to math. And what is numeracy? So there can be many definitions of numeracy, but what we see in other countries and like across the OECD, like essentially rich countries, is at least the completion of algebra.
Yeah.
Which typically for us is ninth grade, though it could be eighth, it could be 10th. For some kids, it can even be 7th, but approximately in that range. And if you're thinking, okay, what's algebra? That's, a system of equations. You have two equations and you have an X and a Y. And you have to figure out what they are.
You're solving
Variables.
for stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're solving for stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you said, what's the purpose of algebra? I mean, solving for X. You know a bunch of things, you don't know one thing. How many times in your life, in your job, do you need to be doing that? And actually, typically, you have many variables you don't know.
Right.
And you need to optimize and solve across those. And so ultimately, algebra is the logic course we all get to take.
I never thought about that before. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's the logic course for everybody. And in learning that way, we change the brain. You can say we almost augment it, right? So, now we think about technology augmenting us, and we have, AI and chatbots, and they're awesome. But, math is technology that augments the brain. It's just technology from 5,000 years ago. And it's still awesome. But that's what it is. Base 10 is technology. It's just from a long time ago. And it changes the brain and it augments our thinking. And so I'd say, let's say numeracy, let's kind of hold it there, that at the minimum, it's algebra. In other countries, the idea that all kids can get to algebra is accepted as normal.
Yeah.
And that would be a definition of numeracy. And those school systems and those societies don't say, all right, a couple kids can do this and the rest can't, and it's totally fine the rest can't. Don't be mean to them.
Or the boys can do it and the girls can't.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The boys can do it, the girls can't. Right? Like that, like my nursery school traumatic pickup moment.
That's where my head went. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd say that's kind of where we sort of have to be clear and brave that all kids can get to algebra. Algebra has a very, very important purpose. It's also, interestingly, I think you'll love this stat, algebra completion is most predictive of high school graduation, college admittance, college graduation. Math coursework is predictive of your earnings a decade after finishing college.
Wow.
Math, high school coursework.
Wow.
So this stuff is not, we know this. This stuff is not pretend. It's where we should be allocating our energy and our ambition for children.
FOMO. I just want to go back and hit this point again because it makes so much sense now. It's like the Matrix I just saw, which is the idea that algebra training, learning how to think about, okay, I'm solving for X. You're building a muscle, just like when you're, lifting weights or whatever, that will allow you to do all these other things, having logical reasoning, being able to deal with uncertainty, it's just that notion. I never thought about it until now, but it's like you're creating that plasticity or whatever in the brain. Wow. So there is it's really awesome. Good. So now that we know that, let's talk about a little bit about Zearn, because this is the company you co-founded. And I think as I was reading about it, I hadn't heard of it, but it is a pretty impactful organization. What is Zearn? What's the impact? Like, give us the download so that those of us who don't know what it is now.
Yeah, thanks. So Zearn is a math learning nonprofit. We started about 12, 13 years ago. And today we have digital lessons, about 1,000 digital lessons that cover every single learning objective, kindergarten through 8th grade. And we served 1 in 4 elementary school students in the country this last academic year, and over 1 million middle school students.
Wow.
Yeah, and teachers have taught us, Zearn, we push code every Thursday and we make it better. And teachers are really teaching us how to make Zearn better and how to use Zearn. As much as we have our ideas that we bring to the table, but the idea is that it can augment great instruction. So what a lot of kids, there's a sort of a really famous thinker in terms of how you get math learning to great in America. And what he says is basically, kids often walk out of math class. You may have felt this yourself. I certainly did, particularly in middle school. Kids kind of walk out of math class like 10 minutes behind. They just sort of just didn't get it. But it's not a catastrophe. They're just 10 minutes behind. But there is no mechanism for them to catch up. What's the mechanism? Like my textbook, my practice app where I'm like shooting a bird and like, what am I going to do? Who's going to like re-explain it to me? How do I get to see some worked problems? How can I just kind of quickly get this? And then you sit down and you can't do your homework. You get pretty frustrated. And if you layer on top of that the narrative that there are only some math kids, like I remember when I was in middle school and high school and I would struggle with my homework. And Patrick, I was on the accelerated track. Like I was in the, higher classes.
Yeah.
And I'd struggle with my homework and I would sit and do a problem set at my desk. I would finish and not be able to do it and be like, okay, I shouldn't be in this accelerated track. I obviously can't do math. I should just stop. Meanwhile, I had years of, A's on tests. I could do the homework last night.
Yeah.
That's a completely irrational reaction. But the societal narrative compounds and we freak out when we can't do things. And so what Zearn offers is this chance to catch kids up. It's just like, what if when you fell behind, something caught you up? There was a safety net. And so math learning didn't feel high stakes. And it actually just felt like learning anything, which is like, sometimes you're confused, sometimes you get it. When you're confused, you get some extra help, and then you're back on track and everything's okay. We don't have enough of that yet in math learning.
Yeah, I was like you. I was in the top classes, but I struggled a little bit, and I got the big, I don't know why our school was like this, but you had to double up on algebra 2 and geometry, and I was not allowed to do that, which was like, I felt like that was the end of my life. I was like, well, that's it for me. I'm not going to have success in life. Thank God I didn't, because I'm really bad at geometry. Like I can't even write a proof still. Maybe I need to use Zearn. Maybe I should, like, given the fact that it's free, check it out. Now, tell me something. It's interesting. I was kind of a little surprised, and maybe it's just that I'm behind the times. But I was like, I've never heard of like a nonprofit that's like a software company. That feels like very unusual, and I'm curious. Am I right? And also, like, how does one, unlike a typical nonprofit where you kind of like raise a little bit of money and then you scale up, like software, you have to like build it, right? So how do you finance something like that? It just seemed very innovative to me when I read about it.
Yeah. I love that question. Thank you. So my background, as you mentioned, like we both went to HBS, and we were there at the same time.
Yes.
And before HBS and after HBS, I worked at Bain Company. So have a lot of, I would say, familiarity when I started Zearn with the for-profit world. And those were my default mental models. And so as a result, our default setting when we started Zearn was as a for-profit for the exact reason that you would say, or anyone would say, which is talent acquisition, capital, just like building.
Yeah.
And so as we got to building, about 2 years into it, it became really clear that if we wanted to build a digital lesson for a child who was kind of doing fine, and there weren't a lot of gaps, there wasn't essentially that much catch up the child needed, then those lessons were ROI positive based on what a venture investor might need back, like the payback period and the amount paid back.
Yep.
That was going to work. But when a kid's actually quite behind, which I'll tell you, we'll talk about in a bit, but it's like 80% of kids in America are behind in math. 80.
Wow.
So when you talk about where we are in math and how universally catastrophic it is, it's a nationwide issue that we should all work on. And so when we were trying to build Zearn for students who were behind in math, which is most kids, that lesson cost 10 times more to build. And what we couldn't see was a path to return. And so I remember there was a meeting with the original founding team and our original investors. And I essentially showed them a couple slides, like in my sort of Bain Company style. And I basically said, we're at a crossroads. And I do see that the desire, the kind of to go to, essentially, if we're pushing toward return on investment and profit, that will interfere with impact.
Yep.
And that's just where we are. And so we can move this equation in different ways, and we can discuss this as a group, but we can't pretend that's not happening. We can't pretend that we could keep moving forward as a for-profit and that we would build the exact same product. That would be a lie. We don't have the incentives. If we're a nonprofit and all of this investment moves from an investment into philanthropy, basically you take your investment, turn it into a donation, everybody has equity, we all put it back in, and we all agree to work in a nonprofit, which I realize none of us signed up to do and I know is nuts. Well, then we can pursue this path. Mm-hmm. But I don't understand how we do anything other than, like, to me, we're at a crossroad. I don't understand the middle. And it was this long, really intense, but authentic conversation where it was the investors, the team, we were looking at the data. And we basically all decided to make Zearn a nonprofit, to donate back our equity. Every single principal investor turned their initial investment into a donation.
Whoa.
The whole team stayed. It was It was a mind-blowing moment. And we have never blinked or looked back since then. And so, one thing that was important to me, having worked in business for so long, was that schools buy things.
Right.
And, it's really nice, actually, when someone buys something, they behave a bit better than when they get something.
They respect it. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
And so what we wanted to think about is if you're a child and your adult is paying and your adult is not paying, it's not your fault. You're a little kid. And you should just get the best math learning available, full stop. But if you're an adult and you want to have a fully loaded experience with all of the additional supports that make it easier to use, then you can buy that because you're buying other stuff.
Yeah.
And so anybody, a parent, a teacher, can set up a free account on Zearn, but schools and districts purchase Zearn.
Yeah.
And that revenue covers the entire operations and some investment of our software company. And then when we need to do big capital investments, which we do, we go to the philanthropic markets. Wow. And because of our scale and impact, we have been successful in the philanthropic markets to be able to raise the money that we need for, one large investment that we just launched that I'm so excited about and just going to be one of the most fun falls to go to classrooms is a new kindergarten experience where we've just sort of pulled out all the stops to make this really wonderful and beautiful kindergarten experience.
Wow. Yeah, I was just Googling as you were talking. I like to research live. You've been implemented in places like Colorado and Ohio. I mean, how many states are you in? Most of them, I imagine, right?
Yeah, so there are active Zearn schools in all 50 states, but there are some states where the governor and the State Department of Education has gotten really invested in behind Zearn. So, for example, you just mentioned Colorado, Ohio, and there's a few other states like that. Louisiana, Virginia. So much fun to work with these teams to, kind of get to their vision. Governor Jared Polis has a vision of numeracy. He thinks all kids should be able to learn and love math. What an honor to get to work and serve his vision.
Yeah, and it is, and you make it look easy. Selling, I have a couple of friends in this business. Selling to states is really hard. You have to, we could do a whole podcast episode about that. We won't today, but it's an incredible lift because, and you are dealing with, there's public opinion and there's just a lot there. So that is not a small feat.
FOMO.
Now, we're going to do our lightning round in a second. Before we go there, I do want to give you a chance because you've written this book, Math Mind, The Simple Path of Loving Math, which is, I have enjoyed it. And I want to just, we have people here who are saying to themselves, wow, I never thought about it. This is like one of those conversations I'm going to be talking about a lot because I didn't think, these are things I didn't think about and should have done. For somebody who picks this book up, what are they going to learn? What are the things they're going to acquire? And how can this book, you talked about the need for better numeracy and the fact that U.S. is way behind. How can this book, talk about impact, like what's the impact you hope to have in our society?
Mm-hmm. Okay, there was a few questions in there.
I know. That's my double barrel, okay. So there you go.
Thank you. I'm going to answer them in reverse order.
Okay.
So, the impact seems modest, but I think could change the world, which is, so I have twins, as I mentioned, and they began reading at different times. And I freaked out that they were reading at different times. I called their teachers, the principal of their elementary school, my pediatrician, and they all said, calm down. The brain begins to read at different times. Both of your children will be successful readers. They're going to love reading. Just calm down. The biggest worry I have is you're the problem. So calm down, read nice books to your kids, and everything is going to be okay. So that's how I want folks to treat numeracy. I want to get that far. So instead of the preschool mom deciding her 4-year-old daughter is not a math kid and announcing that to me in earshot of her daughter and my sons, I want a different world, right? I want a world where like I didn't do well in this math test, or, geometry was tough for me, but I have an innate ability to do mathematics. I mean, birds can do mathematics, babies can count. This is our inborn genetic ability. Of course I'm going to be successful in math. Yeah, I just need a little more time in geometry than other people, but I crushed through, linear functions. Like I just want sort of a different narrative and mindset, one of patience, one that's like a learner mindset, or another word, a growth mindset around learning math. Again, I don't mean to be sort of trite, but if we could see that sort of sea change, and that the other narrative was kind of embarrassing. And so, my kid's pediatrician is telling me I'm the problem. That is victory. So that's kind of what I hope we get to. What the book offers is 3 parts. The first part is just being very real. So obviously you didn't like math. Whether you were actually successful at it or not, math instruction felt kind of humiliating through the whole experience. And let's unpack that, and let's unpack these myths around math that make learning math really hard, and they don't feel like weightlifting, right? So let's say, as I'm Patrick, as I'm getting older, I'm like really into weightlifting now and trying to be strong.
We all are. This is a thing that happens. You're like all of a sudden like, squats with a weight. Love that. Yeah, I get you.
Love that. Exactly.
I see you right now.
Yeah. So imagine if, after you're sore from, squats with the dumbbell, you're like, oh my God, my legs are hurting. I must be dying. Yeah. I should never do this again. That's crazy. That would be a crazy response to the signal. Instead, it's like, my legs are hurting. I'm going to be ripped. I'm awesome. So, the same thing, like when a math question's super hard and you're challenging and you're feeling challenged, like when I was at my desk as a little kid and I couldn't do my homework and I would decide I was dumb. What if instead I thought, wow, this is going to grow my brain?
Yeah.
This is such a hard challenge. And yeah, it's really hard. So maybe I'll ask for some help. But instead it was, I'm dumb. I'm not even going to ask for help because I'm humiliated. I mean, it's just not productive. So I want to move out of that. I think what I offer are 5 like what I say basically, how do you build a math mind? What is a math mind?
Yeah.
And there are 5 things to build a math mind. The first one I spent a bunch of time on, which is belief, self-belief. The second is understanding, not memorizing. The metaphor I'd give you is imagine if you memorized 200 words, but you couldn't read them phonemically. You just memorized it. And then you rolled into a test and you got like a B on the test. But then a week later, you forgot those words you memorized. And so with it, you forgot how to read. That would be insane and terrifying. And that's how we're presenting math. Right? You don't actually have to memorize. You could understand a few big ideas, and then any math problem that shows up, you could do it. And so that's the second, is let's teach math as understanding, not memorizing formulas. The third one, and this is where math starts to like get metaphorical for all of life and problem solving and being a great like employee, also being a phenomenal entrepreneur, which is making tough problems easier. These problems get super overwhelming.
Break them down.
Break them down.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth, find an alternate way through. Look, you might be trying and you're trying away and it doesn't work. Then you don't give up, tear up your, for me, I would break pencils at my desk like a lunatic, as a kid. You're just like, cool, you know what, that way didn't work. I'm gonna take a breath and try a different way.
Be like water and flow around the rock.
Flow, that's right. And the last is, we have to practice to get good at math and to build a math mind, but practice can be fun. Like imagine in reading, if we were like, oh, you need to read, so you'll be reading these appliance manuals. And, it's like, no, you read any book you want that's as fun as you want. Can we make math practice the same? Can we make it actually fun? Board games, card games, they're full of math. Does anybody know they're doing math doing them? They don't. And so those are kind of my 5 tips. And the final section is tips for parents and just like, how do you try to operationalize this?
I love it. The thing that I'm getting out of this all, I'm just thinking back to my childhood. Cause like it wasn't until I did Excel that I really doing Excel spreadsheets and models where it's a lot of abstract thinking. And I was like, it was very easy for me. And I was like, maybe I am pretty good at math. Whereas I always thought I was kind of mediocre. And I did take like calc in college and I like made it through, but I didn't enjoy it. And I kind of found the whole thing very stress inducing. But I didn't think about that. And I think the problem I had is I saw math as binary. It's like in a way that I don't see other subjects. It's not like I'm good at history or bad at history. If math becomes this big binary thing that you just keep on feeling like you're like you said, you're either a math person or you're not, which is not what we want to do. Now, it is time to jump to the lightning round, which is, kind of binary. You just get one per question. So are you ready to do this?
Ready.
All right, good. Number 1, what is a favorite quote?
Okay. So my favorite quote is from the Gita, which is like an ancient Vedic text.
Yes.
So I'll say it. What all beings consider as day is night of the ignorance for the wise, and what all creatures see as night is day for the awakened. And we could all be awakened. We could just wake up and say, the way that we treat kids and math is really mean and does not help any of us. Let's stop.
I appreciate first guest to quote the Bhagavad Gita on the show, except, Jay Shetty and I talked about it a little bit, but that is a good one. Thank you for bringing that into the mix. Number 2, name a book or podcast that every FOMO Sapien should know about.
Okay, so best book I've read so far in 2024. It was a riveting page turner. Is called, and I need to read it again because I didn't process it all. But it's called A Brief History of Intelligence, Evolution, AI, and the 5 Breakthroughs That Made Our Brains.
Wow. What's that? Go ahead.
It's like this sweeping history of biology, the brain, and AI. It is mind-blowing.
Since we're talking math here, I'm going to throw one in, which I never do, but I've never done this. I'm breaking rules today. My classmate from business school, who was 1 year ahead of you, Rachel Barenboim, wrote a book called Atomic Anna that I read over the summer. And it's about math, actually. The protagonist is really good at math. And when she looks at numbers, they just kind of are, it's like, reading for her. And it all becomes very clear. She doesn't have to do any problems in her head. And I had never thought of math almost like music. But it is for her in this book, and it's an awesome book for kids of all ages. It's an adult book, but I think it's also a YA kind of vibe. So a really good book about a woman that tries to go back in time to change history around the Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine.
Wow.
Okay, yeah, it's a good one. Number 3, what's a piece of advice you give to your younger self?
I mean, if I could give to my middle school self, which is when I began to torture myself,
Yeah.
if I could just help this idea of persistence is brilliance, like just actually persisting is the brilliance. It's not this binary, like you're a genius or you're not. And there are some places in my life I could see that, but I couldn't generalize it across my life. And I'm getting much better at that in my 40s. And I wish I could have gotten there earlier.
We'd be so much more normal, wouldn't we? Yikes.
Yeah.
All right, final one. What is your most important memory?
Yeah. So I love that question. You know, what I would say is that, so my parents are, they're from India. They immigrated to the US. They also had this scandalous love marriage and ditched arranged marriages. They're really fun and funny people. And they embody that life is about the journey, not the end. And so many memories, but one in particular was we were kind of catastrophically lost on a road trip. You know, it's before, you got to remember, it's before cell phones, GPS, like we're lost.
Yeah, you could actually get lost back then. I remember those days.
Yeah. And, you know, the kind of default reaction I was going to experience was freaking out. And my parents just found the whole thing so funny. And I can remember these countless experiences as a child of feeling that we were about to hit crisis, and then my parents finding the humor in it, and our whole family rolling on the ground laughing. And I think that's, by the way, a very valuable lesson as an entrepreneur, is sometimes just laugh because it is all very funny.
You know, we didn't do that. We would all freak out on each other, but your family sounds more low-key than the McGinnises. Now, if you want to learn more about Zearn or Shalinee, you can go over to Zearn.org or find her on socials at Zearn Math. If you want to find the book, it is out now. It is called Math Mind, The Simple Path of Loving Math. It's such a nice title. Shalinee Sharma, CEO and co-founder of Zearn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.